But I think one of the most effective models is like a user manual for taking a stand in the Bible. And it's the book of Daniel. And Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego. Some of you might have heard this story in Sunday school. Others of you, it might be the first time you're hearing it. But there are some godly young men who were captured from the place called Judah. And they were captured by a king called Nebuchadnezzar. And he captured them and he took them to a place called Babylon. And Babylon, my friends, was a culture very much like the culture we live in today. Babylon was very driven towards the occult. It was very highly technical. It was an advanced culture. It was focused on learning. And these Hebrew boys, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were thrust into the middle of this dark culture. And in that place, they stood and they took a stand for God. You know, they could have done a few things. They had some choices to make, just like you do, just like I do in this culture that we live in. Man, the Hebrew boys, the first thing they could have done is they could have got to Babylon, and man, they could have just isolated themselves. Man, this Babylon is too dark, it's too scary, too many bad people everywhere. And they could have just formed their own clubs and their own groups. They could have just held hands by the campfire at night and sang, "Kumbaya, my Lord. Kumbaya." And if they would have just isolated themselves and never really impacted their world, the book of Daniel would have been very short. Well, the guys were captured from Judah. They got to Babylon, and they sang "Kumbaya" a few times. The end. Second thing they could have done, they could have said, well, you know what? We're just going to blend in. Whatever happens in Babylon stays in Babylon. We're just going to blend into the culture, man. We're just going to go to the parties. Boom, 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 boom. We're just going to do as the Babylonians do. Completely absorb the world. And guess what, you guys? The book of Daniel never would have been written. Because when you blend into the culture completely, there's no story. And a lot of young people, even today, a lot of people all over North America, they say, well, I'm a Christian. I serve Jesus. I mean, I got Christian on my Facebook. It says Christian. That must be good enough. I'm not talking about just going to church. Because if you just go to church, that doesn't guarantee that you're a Christian. Just because you go to church doesn't mean you're a Christian. Just like being in a garage doesn't make you a car, right? Just like going to McDonald's doesn't make you a Big Mac. Although that's debatable if you eat enough of them, right? But these guys, they went into Babylon, and the Bible says that they were trained in all the ways of their culture, but yet they decided they would not immerse themselves in the culture, and they decided early on, we're going to take a stand. You see, the king had all this food for them to eat, all this wine and all this food. One day Daniel said, "King, respectfully, I don't want to eat this food that you give me. I want to eat different food. I want to eat vegetables, and I want to drink healthy food and water, and I want to not defile my body with the food, the stuff that you're giving me." And the king let him do it. The king said, "Okay, I'll test you." And it says that as he didn't take the king's food, as he chose vegetables and water, it says that they were 10 times healthier and stronger than all the other people that were in the line at the cafeteria. They're in the cafeteria, you know, they're handing out the hash browns and the steak and all this stuff, and Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are like, we're going to have the salad. We're going to have the cucumbers. We're going to have the tofu. And we want the Evian water, please, you know. The Bible says that they chose to eat differently. And because they did that, God began to elevate them in the kingdom of Babylon, and they gained more and more influence, and they became stronger and smarter. And the Bible says that God opened them up to understand even dreams and prophecies. And they became pretty powerful leaders in this kingdom. And one day Nebuchadnezzar gets this idea. He says, man, I'm going to build a big golden statue. Because I don't know what you do if you're a king, like hanging out way back in the day, sitting around there with all that gold and all that time. I mean, they didn't have, cable TV or anything, I don't think. So he's like, well, I'll just build an idol. So he built a big golden idol. The Bible says that it was 9 feet wide and 90 feet tall. Solid gold. He said, okay, we're going to get all the band together, and we're going to get everybody together. And when the band starts playing, okay, I want everybody to bow down and worship this idol. And whoever doesn't do it, let's see, what should we do? Let's make a fire, and we'll throw them into the fire. So they made this big furnace. And so he was on kind of a power trip, obviously. And so he said, okay, man, we're going to play the music, and when it's time to bow, you're going to bow down, or else I'm going to throw you into the furnace. And so the band comes up, and they start thrashing away, and, I don't know, I imagine it was almost like Metallica or something like that, just, it's crazy Babylonian culture. These guys are all rocking out, and everybody's, bowing down, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Dan, you're just like, standing around. Everybody else is bowing down. They're just standing there. Is this thing over yet? We got work to do. They didn't bow down. Nebuchadnezzar got so ticked off. He got so ticked off, he's like, man, you guys are ticking me off. I'm throwing you into the fire. And we know that God rescued them from the fire. We know that when they were thrown into the fire, they were bound up, thrown into the fire. And the Bible says that when they were in the fire, all of a sudden Nebuchadnezzar freaks out, and he gets up and he looks in the fire and he goes, how many guys did we throw in the fire? And the guy beside him is like, 3. He's like, well, I see 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And he says, one of them looks like the Son of God. You see, they went to the fire. They were willing to stand up for their faith. And they said this, I love it, because they rebelled righteously. And they said, we're not going to bow to your idol. We're going to take a stand for our God, even in this godless culture.